First, I'll show the graph of derivatives. Derivatives classified into OTC derivatives. OTC stands for over the counter derivatives, and ETD stands for exchange traded derivatives. So what is derivatives, we'll see in some time. ETD, exchange traded derivatives. Over the counter derivative, it has been further classified into forward and swaps. Exchange traded derivatives further classified into futures and options. Swaps further classified into many types like currency swaps, interest rate swaps, credit default swaps, equity return swaps. Options have been further classified into call options and put options. For this particular video, we will be learning about derivatives, what is derivatives, what is over the counter derivatives, what is exchange traded derivatives, and types of over the counter. Within that, we'll be learning forward and futures. Okay, for swaps and options, I will make another video, right? So we'll see first what is derivatives. So derivatives, now as per the textbook definition, derivative is a financial instrument because it has monetary value. Okay, so it is a financial instrument whose value is derived. I'm underlining the word derived. Okay, whose value is derived based on the underlying asset. So what does this mean? Based on the underlying asset. So derivative, see, derivative is coming out of the word derive. So derive means what? Predicting, finding, and predicting, finding, deriving is always about talking about the future time. Okay, it is talking about the future time. Okay, for example, here, see, there is a buyer, there is a seller. Now in case one, imagine this buyer, he wants to buy 1 gram of gold, and so he is paying right now the price of gold is, let's say, 5,000 rupees. This buyer is paying 5,000, and the seller is giving 1 gram of gold. Now in this case there is nothing to predict, because currently the price of gold is 5,000, the buyer is paying 5,000, and the seller is giving the underlying asset, which is gold in this case. Now in this case there is nothing to predict, so this is called spot transactions. This is not a derivative, this is spot transactions. On the spot, whatever the price is, that price is given to the seller, and the seller is giving the underlying asset. Now case 2, buyer is entering into an agreement with the seller. However, he doesn't want to buy and sell immediately. He's just entering into the agreement. Buyer says he is ready to buy gold at the rate of 5,500, but after 1 year. So the expiry date of this contract is after 1 year. Okay, after 1 year is the expiry date. So the date will be fixed in advance today itself. And seller agrees to give gold after 1 year. Okay, so now why does the buyer enter into the contract like this? Because he wants to lock the price, because he believes that maybe after 1 year the price might shoot up to, he believes that the price might shoot up to 6,000. So So he wants to buy gold at this price, at the agreed price of 5,500. And seller will have the contrary view. He might be under the impression that the price of this gold might come down to 5,000 or 4,500. So he is also happy to lock the price at 5,500. Okay. So on what basis are they thinking all these things? It can be about their predictions, about what they think about government rules about, say for example, excise duty, what they think about the excise duty, what they think about macro conditions, macroeconomic conditions. Okay, so based on various factors, buyer is happy to lock the price at 5,500, and even the seller. And on the expiry date, suppose if the actual price as predicted by the buyer, it comes to 6,000. So in that case, this amount is fixed. This amount is freezed. This is fixed. Okay, now this is the agreement amount. Okay, so on the expiry date, agreed amount. So on the expiry date, if it is 6,000, okay, buyer will be making a profit of 500. Why so? Because the underlying assets actual value in the market is 6,000, whereas he is able to get it for 5,500. And so seller will be losing this money 500, and buyer is able to make 500 profit, right? So this is called so this is a derivative contract. Okay, so here they have derived the price. Now if they have derived the price, and if it is a derivative contract, what we have seen is there are two types of derivatives. One is over the counter derivatives, another one is exchange traded derivatives. So it has to be either over the counter or exchange traded derivatives. So how will I differentiate now? So that's simple. Exchange traded derivative means where exchange is involved, where exchange is involved in it. Whereas in this case, there is no exchange involved in it. It is a privately negotiated contract between two parties, buyer and seller. And so, because there is no exchange involved in it, it is privately negotiated between two counterparties. It is called as over the counter derivatives. It is over the counter derivatives because it is privately negotiated. Now, if it is over the counter derivatives, it has to be either forward or it has to be swaps. Okay, now what is swaps? In swaps, exchange of cash flows happens. X and Y both will exchange cash flows. Okay, both will exchange cash flows. How is it possible? That we will see in swaps video. So in this case, both the sides, they are not exchanging cash flows, correct? So one party is giving cash, another party is taking the underlying asset, that is gold. So this is not swaps. So this comes under forward. Okay, so this is an example of forward contract. Okay, this is an example of forward contract. Fine. So if I have to articulate it, how will I say? So forward contract, first of all, it is a type of derivative contract. Okay, so type of derivative contract, okay, to buy or sell. Okay, for the buyers, for the buyer it is to buy, and for the seller it is to sell. It's a type of derivative contract to buy or sell the underlying asset, at the future date, correct? At the future date for the price agreed today. For the price agreed today. So today they are agreeing for 5,500. However, it will be executed at the future date. Okay. So this is forward contract. Now, what are the characteristics of forward contract? So characteristics. So number one, it is an over the counter derivatives. Over the counter derivatives, yeah, or privately negotiated derivatives. Privately negotiated. Okay. Then it is highly highly customized. Now what do you mean by that? Customized as in both buyer and seller can decide the quantity. Why only 1 gram of gold? They can enter into the contract for 10 grams, 100 grams. It's up to them. So that's why it is customized, and also they can decide the expiry date. Okay, so as long as they both are agreeing, they can decide any expiry date, they can decide any quantity, and so it is highly customized. Then there is no initial margin. Now what do you mean by this? No initial margin. In a very layman language, you can think like, there is no advance payment. Neither the buyer is going to make any advance payment to the seller, nor the seller is going to make any advance payment to the buyer. So technically it is called no initial margin in this contract. And so because there is no initial contract, there is no initial margin, there is high risk of default. There is high risk of default. So what does this mean? Because anybody can dishonor the contract. Anybody can dishonor the contract if they suffer huge losses. Okay, yeah. So these are some of the characteristics of forward contract. Then uh, now what happened was further, you know, business is all about innovation. It is all about finding the loopholes in the present product, and then filling up all those loopholes and coming up with a new product, and then giving a new terminology. Like for example, we had landline phone. The drawback of landline phone was that it is immovable. If you are outside the home, you cannot convey message. And so further it was rectified, and we and mobile came in, and mobile was added with many other features like internet video calling, and then we gave a new terminology as a smartphone. That's what business is all about. Similarly, research happened over here also, like how to enhance this product. Now these characteristics, this high risk of default seems very very something one would not like to see. So this is something which should be eliminated, otherwise this can stop a lot of forward contract happening. So a research happened, like how do we mitigate this risk. Okay, so how do we mitigate this risk? So this gave rise to um, so how it was mitigated is, when X and Y are entering into the contract, when X and Y are entering into the contract, right now they are entering into the contract privately on their own. There is no third party involved in it. So the idea was to involve a third party, a regulated entity. Okay, so an exchange will be involved in it. So what happens over here is, when an exchange is involved in it, okay, when an exchange is involved in it, exchange acts as the third party which is involved in the contract. Now X will be paying initial margin to the exchange so that he doesn't dishonor the contract. Similarly, Y will be paying initial margin. Similarly, Y will be paying initial margin to the exchange so that he doesn't dishonor the contract. So this way, this risk was mitigated. Okay, so that means now in this case, okay, in this kind of contract, initial margin is involved. Initial margin is involved, low risk of default, low risk of default. Okay, and because it is happening through electronic platform, the exchange said that they cannot be highly customized. It is meant for only for certain commercialized products, like gold, silver, or uh, shares like Reliance, large cap companies like Reliance, HDFC, ICICI, only for this kind of companies. Okay, so that means the service offered by this exchange is highly standardized. Okay, standardized. So they said, like their platform is open for certain commercialized products, and also um, they standardize the expiry date of the contract as well. In India, ideally last Thursday is considered as the expiry date of the contract, last Thursday of the month. Yeah. And so here the next one is privately negotiated under forward over the counter. So over here, it happens through exchange. So exchange is involved. Yeah, exchange is involved in this kind of contract. So you see now all the characteristics are changing. All the characteristics are changing because of the involvement of this exchange. Okay, so a new terminology was given to this kind of contract. This was termed as futures. Okay, so what we are seeing is futures. So futures, in futures, exchange is involved, standardized, initial margin is involved, and so low risk of default, right? So these are the characteristics of futures.